The summer sun over Silver Pine Ridge was brutal that year, the kind that made asphalt shimmer and roofs sizzle like griddles. From his porch, Elliot Crane squinted at the row of manicured houses across the cul-de-sac, all beige, all identical, all owned by people who thought the HOA's rulebook was holy scripture. But his house stood out. It wasn't flashy, just efficient. Solar panels glinting on the roof, a small wind turbine spinning lazily behind his barn, and a Tesla Powerwall humming quietly in the shade. Elliot was a 47-year-old electrical engineer who had spent half his career designing energy-efficient systems for the Department of Energy. His motto was simple: if you can build it smarter, build it once. But in the world of HOA bylaws and suburban egos, intelligence was a threat, and independence was a crime. It all started with a letter. Not even a real one, a printed template. Shoved into his mailbox, urgent notice of violation, stamped in red like a blood smear. The offense? Unauthorized installation of reflective equipment visible from the street. Elliot stared at it, half amused, half irritated. He'd filed the permit with the county, got it approved, and even submitted the plans to the HOA board 6 months ago. They'd said nothing then. But now, just 2 weeks after his panels went live and cut his electric bill to near zero, the HOA suddenly decided his home violated aesthetic standards. He walked inside, poured himself a coffee, and read the notice again. It was signed by Janice Barlow, HOA president, a retired realtor with a taste for floral blouses, power trips, and Chardonnay before noon. Janice had been a thorn in his side since the first community meeting he'd attended 3 years ago. She didn't like tech people, she'd said once, smiling tight as a purse string. Claimed their gadgets disrupted community harmony. Elliot had brushed it off, but now that same woman had fined him $150 per day for unauthorized equipment. That fine would double if not paid within 10 days. He dialed the HOA office, got Janice's voicemail, her syrupy voice saying, "We appreciate your cooperation in maintaining the neighborhood's charm." He left one sentence: "Charm doesn't pay the power bill, Janice." By week's end, the HOA escalated. A notice on his door, bright orange, claiming his property would be subject to compliance inspection. It might as well have said invasion of privacy. Elliot knew the law. Under Colorado's Solar Rights Act, no HOA could outright ban solar panels. But Janice wasn't banning them. She was enforcing community aesthetics, a loophole used by HOA tyrants everywhere. That night, he drove to the county records office, photocopied the state statute, highlighted the clause about renewable energy systems, and taped it to his front door right beside the HOA's orange notice. Then, with a dry chuckle, he set his porch light to solar power only. The next morning, Janice showed up herself, clipboard in hand, 2 board members flanking her like hired muscle. Elliot opened the door before she could knock. "Morning, Ms. Barlow," he said evenly. She peered past him at the solar array glittering in the sun. "This equipment reflects into neighboring windows," she said, her tone sharp. "You're creating a hazard," Elliot smiled. "You mean sunlight? The thing that's existed for about forever?" She stiffened. The board voted unanimously. "You'll need to remove them within 7 days." He folded his arms. "And if I don't?" She smiled that tight realtor smile. "Then we'll take legal action. And we never lose in Silver Pine Ridge." What Janice didn't know was that Elliot had already started digging, not into dirt, but into data. He'd found the HOA's 2012 incorporation filings, full of inconsistencies, missing signatures, lapsed registrations, even unpaid state fees. Technically, their corporate status had expired 2 years ago, meaning every fine they'd issued since then was legally void. That night, Elliot set up a corkboard in his workshop, pinning documents, maps, and emails with red string crisscrossing like a spider's web. On one corner, he scribbled in black marker, "If they want a power struggle, I'll show them what real power means." Within a week, Janice doubled the fines, mailed threats of a lien, and sent letters to the local utility claiming his solar panels were unsafe. The utility laughed and forwarded her email to Elliot. Apparently, she'd tried to convince them his setup was illegally feeding power back into the grid. "That's literally how net metering works," Elliot muttered, shaking his head. He wasn't angry anymore. He was entertained. But then things turned serious. One night, around 10:45 p.m., the lights flickered, then died completely. The entire street went black, except Elliot's house, glowing steady from stored solar power. A few neighbors stumbled outside, muttering, holding flashlights. Elliot stepped out too, and in the glow of his porch light, saw Janice's husband across the street fumbling with a fuse box, the HOA's master power panel. He had a crowbar in hand. Elliot pulled out his phone, hit record, and whispered, "Caught you." The video was crystal clear. The next day, he sent it anonymously to the Silver Pine Herald, local news. Headline 2 days later, HOA president's husband, accused of tampering with neighborhood power grid. Chaos erupted. The HOA scrambled to control the narrative, claiming it was routine maintenance. But Elliot had more proof. Texts from a board member accidentally sent to him instead of Janice. He says if we cut power, maybe the county will declare his system unsafe. The message timestamped 10:42 p.m., right before the blackout. Now Elliot had leverage, not just legal, but public. Still, he didn't want revenge yet. He wanted strategy. He wrote an email to the HOA board. Effective immediately, all communication will go through my attorney. Also, consider this your formal request for disclosure of financial and operational records under Colorado HOA transparency law. Janice replied 3 hours later, "You're making a big mistake." Elliot typed back, "No, Janice, you made it when you thought you could shut out the sun." He didn't know it yet, but that single line, that quiet defiance, would spark a chain of events that would expose years of HOA fraud, force resignations, and end with Elliot controlling more than just his own power grid. For 2 weeks after that email exchange, the HOA board went quiet, suspiciously quiet. No late-night knocks, no passive-aggressive letters about community cohesion, nothing. Elliot knew better than to think they'd given up. Bureaucrats don't retreat. They reload. So while Janice and her cronies licked their wounds, Elliot prepared for their next move. His first step was to document everything, not as a paranoid neighbor, but as an engineer who lived by data. He logged every email, every notice, every conversation. He even installed motion-activated security cameras aimed toward the HOA's office trailer at the entrance of the subdivision. He'd learned something crucial during his years consulting for the Department of Energy. Corruption always leaves a signal trail. And if you understand how systems fail, you can make them collapse under their own weight. Late one evening, Elliot's friend and former co-worker, Nora Martinez, stopped by. She worked as a compliance auditor for the state's Public Utilities Commission. He poured her coffee and showed her his thick binder of HOA correspondence. She flipped through it, eyebrows climbing. "This Janice lady submitted complaints to the utility using official forms," she said. "But these aren't official. They're templates, copies of PDFs she edited." Elliot leaned forward. "Meaning?" Nora smiled. "Meaning she impersonated a public safety officer." "That's a felony." That was the first crack in Janice's facade. Elliot began digging deeper into HOA filings. The more he found, the worse it got. Invoices for community maintenance paid to a company called Ridgeview Services LLC. No website. No phone number, just a P.O. box. The state's business registry listed the owner as James Barlow, Janice's husband. HOA funds were literally flowing into her own household. It wasn't just about aesthetics anymore. It was about control and profit. He needed proof beyond suspicion. One night, he positioned a drone over the cul-de-sac and filmed as a landscaping truck labeled Ridgeview Services unloaded chemical drums behind the HOA storage shed. The footage showed James transferring liquid into sprayers used for weed control. Nora sent the clip to a friend at Environmental Health. Lab tests later confirmed the mixture contained petroleum solvents, the kind that could damage soil and seep into groundwater. Then came the second blackout. This time it wasn't local. A fuse failure cascaded through the neighborhood's private transformer. 32 homes went dark for 6 hours. The utility company denied responsibility. The grid hadn't been touched. Elliot checked his own logs and realized what happened. Someone had rerouted power through an outdated subpanel that had been decommissioned years ago, a system he had helped design when the subdivision was first built. His fingerprints were in its schematics. He walked to the HOA's office the next morning carrying a small USB drive. Janice stood outside, sunglasses on, sipping from her ever-present tumbler of Chardonnay. "You're trespassing," she snapped. Elliot smiled. "Actually, I'm consulting. See? This entire power distribution network runs through a grid I designed in 2012. Every junction, every transformer, every failsafe. He paused, holding up the drive. And this file proves you're illegally modifying it, Janice scoffed. You think you scare me with your gadgets? Elliot tilted his head. No, but the Department of Energy might. Her smirk wavered. Within days, the county inspector arrived, accompanied by 2 men in utility jackets. They examined the transformers, traced wiring, and documented improper reroutes clearly linked to HOA maintenance. Janice's husband had installed unlicensed connections that violated state electrical code. The inspector cited the HOA for 6 counts of public safety violation, each carrying fines up to $10,000. The news spread through Silver Pine Ridge like wildfire. Homeowners started whispering, questioning where their dues were going, why they kept losing power while Janice's house always glowed like Times Square. Elliot kept quiet publicly, but privately he built his masterstroke. Using his engineering expertise, he integrated his solar array with a custom monitoring dashboard, a live display showing real-time power data from every node of the grid he'd once designed. Through publicly available telemetry, he tracked when HOA facilities drew energy from his own lines. They were literally stealing his stored solar power to keep their clubhouse lights on during outages. Nora helped him compile a full report. Charts, timestamps, meter logs, bank statements linking HOA payments to Ridgeview services, even emails between Janice and the utility rep she'd threatened with lawsuits for non-compliance. It was airtight, but Elliot didn't want to bury her in court filings. He wanted exposure. The opportunity came when the HOA announced an emergency community meeting. Janice intended to censure him for endangering residents with experimental power devices. Elliot attended in a plain gray shirt, laptop under his arm, calm and unassuming. The clubhouse buzzed with tension. Homeowners murmuring, board members sweating under fluorescent lights. Janice banged her gavel. Mr. Crane, do you admit you've modified electrical systems without authorization? Elliot clicked his laptop, projecting his dashboard onto the wall. Authorization? No, just data. You see, every time you reroute power, the system logs an anomaly. Here's one from July 3rd, 9:42 p.m. You overloaded the HOA maintenance line. The graph spiked in red. Here's another, July 12th, 10:45 p.m. Your husband cut live current to 32 homes. Murmurs rose. And this one, he said, zooming in, shows Ridgeview Services pulling stored solar from my grid at 2 a.m. to power your clubhouse freezer. That's theft. Janice's face turned ashen. That's fabricated, she began. But Elliot clicked again, revealing a live feed from his drone the night before. James refilling the illegal sprayers behind the shed. Gasps echoed through the room. Environmental Health already has the samples, Elliot said quietly. They'll confirm contamination by next week. By the time he finished, Janice's voice was trembling. You think you're some kind of hero? He met her eyes. No, I'm an engineer. I just fix broken systems. Outside, as the meeting dissolved into chaos, Nora joined him by his truck. You just dropped a bomb in there, she said. He nodded. It was time someone cut the power to their lies. But it wasn't over. Janice still had connections, a cousin on the city council, a friend at the bank that handled HOA accounts. And when Elliot's attorney received an anonymous tip that large withdrawals were being made from the HOA's reserve fund, he realized Janice's empire was about to crumble, and she'd burn the whole neighborhood with her before letting it happen. For the next 3 days, the air around Silver Pine Ridge felt electrified, and not just from the storms rolling in. Janice Armitage had been publicly humiliated, but she wasn't finished. Power-hungry people rarely surrender when cornered. They double down, and Elliot Crane knew from years of engineering failure diagnostics that systems collapse most violently right before shutdown. It began with whispers in the community Facebook group. Posts appeared claiming Elliot had illegally tapped the neighborhood grid and was harvesting data from private homes. The language was polished, written like a PR firm's release, which meant Janice had help. She'd retained a crisis management consultant from Denver, someone experienced in spinning scandal into martyrdom. Within hours, neighbors started dividing into factions, Team HOA and Team Elliot. Nora warned him. She's trying to shift narrative control. Public sentiment matters before litigation. Elliot nodded grimly. Then we'll win it with facts, not noise. He spent the next night building a presentation unlike anything Silver Pine Ridge had seen. Not just legal documents and evidence charts, but visual proof of how energy flowed through the neighborhood. He wanted to make invisible corruption visible to everyone's eyes, but before that truth could reach daylight, Janice struck again. On a Thursday morning, Elliot woke to the faint smell of ozone and something burning. He rushed outside. One of his solar control inverters was scorched black. The damage wasn't random. Wires had been intentionally crossed, shorting the entire string, a crude act of sabotage. His heart pounded. The HOA's clubhouse still had lights on. His? Dark. He called the sheriff's office, filed a report, and shared footage from his motion sensors. Two silhouettes hooded around 3:14 a.m. caught on thermal camera near his power units. No clear faces, but one figure limped slightly on the left leg. James Barlow, Janice's husband, had that same limp from an old ladder fall. The deputy took the footage, shaking his head. These HOA wars are getting wild. Elliot didn't wait for the system to fix it. He repaired the inverter by evening and installed reinforced metal enclosures around every junction. Then he added a new feature: hidden diagnostic triggers that would instantly alert him if any circuit was tampered with, and broadcast the alert live through his dashboard feed. Meanwhile, Nora uncovered another bombshell.
Janice moved $82,000 from the HOA reserve fund to a personal account at Ridgeview Credit Union, she said, eyes flashing.
That's criminal misappropriation of member funds. Elliot leaned back, absorbing it. She's running, he murmured. Trying to cash out before the collapse. They decided it was time for the nuclear option: exposure through data and daylight. The next Saturday, the HOA convened what Janice called a special emergency assembly at the clubhouse. Her email, written in self-righteous bold text, declared the purpose: to vote on immediate expulsion of Mr. Crane from the community for endangering residents and tampering with shared utilities. Elliot arrived early, laptop under arm, quiet as ever. Nora followed, carrying 2 sealed envelopes. The room was packed, 40-something homeowners murmuring between folding chairs. Some glared. Others looked curious, even hopeful. Janice stood at the front, her white blazer crisp as her anger. Thank you all for coming. This meeting concerns serious violations by Mr. Crane, she began, voice steady but trembling underneath. He has connected unauthorized devices to our power system, spied on residents, and endangered our community. Elliot raised a hand. May I respond? Janice hesitated, then smirked. Briefly, he plugged in his laptop to the projector. Let's talk about power. You all pay the HOA to keep lights on, maintain safety, and ensure fairness. But what if the very system meant to protect you was stealing from you? The first slide flickered to life. A 3D schematic of the Silver Pine Ridge grid, lines of color tracing every home's power flow. See this? Elliot zoomed in. That's the transformer your dues supposedly maintain. But 20% of its load feeds directly into this line, labeled HOA Maintenance Facility. Except that facility also powers Janice's private workshop. Gasps. Someone whispered, wait, she's using our electricity? Next slide. Bank statements and Ridgeview Services invoices side by side. Every dollar you paid in utility maintenance went to a company owned by her husband. No registered employees. No licenses. Just 2 people diverting your fees and your power. Janice slammed her gavel. Lies, fabrications. He hacked our systems. Elliot didn't flinch. If that were true, I'd be in handcuffs. Instead, I'm here with Environmental Health, who tested the chemical sprayers behind your office. Nora stepped forward, handing copies of the lab results to the front row. Those chemicals violate state environmental codes. They were sprayed near the runoff basin feeding your children's playground. The room exploded with voices. Janice shouted over them, He's manipulating you! He's a disgraced engineer. Elliot cut her off, calm but sharp. You're right. I'm an engineer. I design systems that don't fail. And I designed this one before you ever arrived. He tapped his keyboard, and the live feed switched to a real-time dashboard. Lines pulsed like veins, data flickering across the wall. Right now, your HOA office is drawing power from my solar array. Watch, the graph spiked. The crowd gasped. And now, Elliot said, pressing another key, I'm isolating that circuit. The clubhouse lights flickered, then went dark. Gasps filled the blackness. That's the difference between borrowed power and earned power, Elliot said quietly. You've been living off stolen energy. When the lights came back on, this time from backup supply, 2 sheriff's deputies were already entering. Nora had filed the environmental and financial complaints that morning. The warrant had come through faster than expected. One deputy stepped forward. Janice Armitage, we have a court order for seizure of HOA financial records and electronic equipment. Janice's face drained of color. This is harassment. I'm the president of this community. The deputy's tone was ice. Not anymore, ma'am. As they escorted her and her husband out, murmurs rippled into applause. Elliot just stood quietly, watching the data on his laptop normalize. The aftermath unfolded over weeks. The county launched a full investigation into Ridgeview Services, revealing 5 years of fraudulent billing and over $230,000 in stolen HOA dues. The state environmental agency fined Janice and James personally for illegal chemical disposal. Their home went up for auction to pay restitution, but the part that went viral, the moment that made headlines statewide, came from a clip someone uploaded from that meeting. The instant the lights went out when Elliot cut the power. The caption read, "When the HOA president bans your solar panels, but you own the grid." It hit 2.3 million views in a week. Within months, Elliot was invited to speak at renewable energy conferences, telling his story under the headline, "How an HOA corruption case sparked the Clean Power Reform Act." The town council voted to dissolve the old HOA and replace it with a community-managed cooperative. Open meetings, transparent budgets, renewable incentives. On the 1-year anniversary, Elliot walked the hill behind his home where his solar panels gleamed in morning light. Nora joined him, handing him a mug of coffee. Below, the houses of Silver Pine Ridge shimmered in the sun, powered by the grid he'd once designed, now legally community-owned. She smiled. "You really built this from the ground up," he nodded. "No," he said softly. "I just turned the lights back on." A breeze swept through the panels, making them hum faintly, like the heartbeat of something reborn.